911 operators of Reddit. What's the strangest serious emergency you've ever heard? Story 1. Not me, but my cousin. She had this lady who would call regularly and often make up stories, most likely out of loneliness, but they still had to send someone out every time. So one day, when they got a call from her, they figured it would just be another one of those calls. Cousin, 911, what's your emergency? Her, there's a lion in my living room. Cousin, there's a lion in your living room? What's it doing? Her, pauses to ask it what it was doing. I don't know, just standing there. Can you send someone over? Turns out there actually was a lion cub in her living room that had escaped from a nearby circus or something. Story 2. I've got one for you. The obligatory, not 9/11, but it ties together. I worked for an alarm monitoring company, and one night I got an inbound call from somewhere in Philadelphia. The guy on the line sounded really out of it, maybe drunk? My first thought was that it was someone calling to cancel a false alarm, and the messed up voice was just them waking from sleep, which wasn't uncommon. But then some alarms, no pun intended, started going off in my head. The guy wasn't making much sense, and it was really hard to get even basic information out of him. Eventually, I pieced together that he was a gas station worker and that he'd been shot. For some reason, he had dialed the alarm company instead of 911. We weren't even his alarm company. There was probably just an old sticker in the shop somewhere, so I had no info on this guy. Keep in mind, we didn't have any magical reverse phone lookup system, and our systems were locked down, so we couldn't even access a web browser. Genius, I know. So I pulled out my personal phone, also not allowed, managed to look up a gas station with that inbound number in Philly, and then called 911 to get police and medical out there. I have no idea how it ultimately turned out. I just stayed on the line, keeping the guy conscious and talking until help arrived, then disconnected. Story 3. Nothing really jumps out at me as the strangest. I can think of worst, scariest, dumbest, most infuriating, etc. Some good ones are people saying they locked themselves inside their car, getting ripped off by a hooker, someone reporting their things were stolen. By things, they meant a safe full of weed. A mugger going around hitting people in the neck with a taser, yelling "surprise motherfucker" in a deep voice, then taking their phones and wallets. Just so many 911 calls where people essentially called and got themselves arrested because they were in the wrong, not the person they were calling about. A guy went jogging along the beach, came back to find his car gone. While driving him home after taking a report, we drove right past it. He had just forgotten where he parked. Tried to let a guy off who was obviously up to some shady shit. Told him and his girlfriend to just go rent a room and rethink their lives. He ended up stealing the cop's cell phone. The cop had made a call for them since their phone was dead. Later, when they caught up with him, he had a fuck ton of meth in his car. A guy got into a fight with a bunch of ducks, started losing, tried jumping a fence, slipped, and tore his nutsack open on the fence. Thinking about it, I do have one that stands out. A woman called saying her boyfriend was bleeding in the shower. I tried to get her to explain where and how, but she kept beating around the bush and wouldn't come right out with it. We only found out from the paramedics afterward. She was a nurse, and while fooling around she tried to catheterize him while he was hard. She ended up puncturing something, and they couldn't get the bleeding to stop. Story 4. A family friend was, and possibly still is, a paramedic with the helicopter service here. I'm not sure if this happened when he was ground-based or in the helicopter, but he always enjoyed telling this story. He was called out to a head trauma incident and arrived to find a man sitting in his living room, acting surprisingly normal for a call like that. He asked what was wrong, and the man said, "Well, I've got this here," then turned to show a screwdriver buried to the hilt in his head. The paramedic obviously said something along the lines of how that wasn't good, and the man replied, "Nah, it's all right," before beginning to twist the screwdriver. They told him to stop. I also had a professor who once said he shot a cat with a shotgun trying to get it out of a tree, and another who made his partner pass out after a girl showed him her eyeball that had popped out following a car accident. These are all anecdotal and may not be true, but they're stories I was told. Story 5. One day I walked in after grabbing a Subway sandwich. My shift started at 1 p.m. My coworkers had already received both 911 and regular calls from a wife and mother about her husband, son. He had been walking around the house for hours, talking about taking all the children to heaven, just circling over and over. Inside the home there was a newborn, a toddler, and I think a 5-year-old. It was a weekend, and our chief advised that as long as he wasn't acting violent or overtly dangerous, just odd, we'd wait until Monday for a mental health warrant from the Justice of the Peace. This was in East Texas, where it takes 20 to 30 minutes of driving the speed limit to get anywhere in the county, and sometimes over an hour from one end to the other if you know where you're going. This continued all day, up until about 11 p.m. The wife and mother were getting increasingly frantic that he'd been pacing and muttering the same things for hours. Then I got a call that began with a loud bang, followed by screaming and crying from the wife and her newborn. The husband had killed his 2 sons and his mother with a shotgun and was coming for his wife. She cried, asking why we hadn't helped them, begging us to save her and her babies. About 10 seconds later, there was another bang. The wife was killed instantly, and the baby was hit with 1 to 2 pellets in the head, making gurgling sounds before dying. Roughly a minute later, I heard one final shot. The man had loaded a slug into the shotgun, blasted off the top portion of his face, and lay on the ground drowning in his own blood. And that was it. Story 6. The first call I ever took was from a blind, elderly man. He called because he had found his son on the bedroom floor. The son wasn't responding, so I had him tilt his head back and listen for a breath. Nothing. He said his son was still warm and that he had spoken with him less than 20 minutes earlier, so I guided him through CPR, compressions only, given the circumstances. He lived in a rural part of our county, and we were short on rigs, so we did compressions for about 12 minutes before help finally arrived on scene. EMS went inside and immediately asked for PD. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes loved ones can't or don't want to accept that it's too late, so we go through the motions until a trained eye can confirm. Then PD arrived and asked for a detective, which also wasn't uncommon in younger deaths. 2 hours later, still curious, I called the first officer who had arrived. That's when I found out the awful truth. The poor man had been doing CPR on his now mostly headless son. The son had committed suicide with a shotgun while his father was napping. The blast had woken him up, but not quickly enough for him to register it as a gunshot. When I had asked him to tilt his son's head back, he did it by using his chin, since that was still there. In the end, I think it was better that way. He had support there when he finally learned the truth, and it didn't make my job harder in the moment. But it definitely made for a very unusual start to my dispatch career. Story 7. This one needs a little backstory before the actual call. We had a woman who called quite often. She even moved out of our jurisdiction to another location. But because we were better at customer service, she wouldn't call their 911. Instead, she would call our 7-digit non-emergency line to reach us. She called regularly, often for ridiculous reasons, like the time she told me her gay neighbors, who were abominations, were also watching her while she showered. Another time, she called to report that elves were at her house and had stolen both her hair and her uterus. Needless to say, she wasn't all there. Every time we asked if she wanted someone sent out, she always said no. Fast forward a while. She's still in the other jurisdiction, so we can't respond, and she tells us that a man is smoking cigarettes under her mattress. We go through the usual routine with her, and surprisingly, she says she wants someone to come over. We call the local PD, explain the nature of her call, and politely suggest, because of her out-of-the-ordinary request, that they send someone out. Police arrived to find a homeless man smoking cigarettes under her bed. He'd pried open a window and snuck in to get out of the weather. A few other crazy, funny, or just bizarre calls. A lady called to complain that the power entering her house was now coming from a different direction due to construction down the road to the north, and that it was causing power fluctuations. Being rational, I told her it was a power company problem, not 911. She then said it was our problem because every time the power fluctuated, people entered her house. My personal guess was that it might be interfering with her alarm, so I asked how they were gaining entry. She responded, "Through my chest." My brain tried to rationalize it any way I could, but nothing was coming to me, short of someone tunneling into her home, which was absurd. So my next question was, what chest? "Through my chest, you know, from right between my breasts." She received a prompt response. Another woman called to give me a general area to check because zombies were surrounding her house, and she wanted us to get out there and do what we do. Then there was Jesus, the Morning Star, the Trinity, who needed help because she had lost her throne and wanted help finding it. Story 8. Not a 911 operator, but I was in the vicinity. My best friend, we'll call him D, and I walked into his parents' house. expecting to find his girlfriend, let's call her Kay, on the couch or the bed, where we were all going to smoke a joint, chill, and I'd crash on the couch. On that exact same couch was Kay, skin pale, lips blue, foam around her mouth, a half-empty syringe beside her, and a dinner plate with an unknown powder on the coffee table in front of her. Dee freaked out, smacking her face, laying her on her side, and desperately trying to get her to wake up. I didn't care if they arrested all of us at that point. I called 911. While I was on the phone with the operator, Dee cried, "She's got a pulse, man, I think," and hugged her, sobbing harder than I've ever seen anyone. Please, Kay, please wake up, baby." His parents came downstairs. His mom broke down crying while his dad saw the plate and started screaming about drugs being in the house. It got ugly. I walked outside to finish the call before I broke down myself. It was soul-crushing to watch. Turns out Kay was still alive. Her pulse was 35, dangerously close to cardiac arrest. The powder was fentanyl. No one was arrested. There's a law in my state that if EMTs are called and not police, the suspect can't legally be charged for any drugs found at the location. They kept her for 2 days, giving her Narcan all through the first night. She went to rehab, and now she's with another classmate, happily married with 2 kids. Dee, well, not so well, but that's a story for another time. Story 9. It wasn't my call, but one we had to listen to in training to prepare us for what we were getting into. A guy calls 911 to say there's a body in his house. They go through the routine, eventually getting the name of the deceased. That's where things get strange. When you call 911, caller ID displays your information so we can confirm it. When the man gave her the name of the deceased, it matched the caller ID. She tells him she needs the deceased man's name, not his, since they'd already confirmed his identity. In a completely normal tone, he replies, "Oh, no, I'm just telling you where to find my body and letting you know it wasn't a murder." The dispatcher spent the next few minutes trying to talk him out of it, doing her best to either convince him not to go through with it or at least stall him until the team got there. The entire time, the man remained calm, almost cheerful, like he was just shrugging it off. "Nope, I've made up my mind. I'll just be in the bedroom." The cops didn't get there in time. The dispatcher heard him say, "Thanks, bye," before a shotgun blast and the sound of agonal breathing. Cops arrived a few minutes later. I think what struck me most was how calm he was about it. I've heard of suicidal people having that kind of upbeat disposition once they've made a plan to go through with it, but actually hearing it was surreal. Story 10. I wasn't the dispatcher, but I was called out for mutual aid to a call once. My buddy was the dispatcher that night for the county sheriff, and I was volunteering at a rural fire department. Around 11 p.m. we got paged for a mutual aid, a search operation for a missing hunter at a local hunting camp. It was a small department, so it was just me and a fairly new guy. When we arrived, the sheriff and the primary responding department told us it was just a hunter who'd gotten separated from his party, which happens a couple of times a year. They had the rest of his party sitting in the squad car. I was talking to the sheriff, trying to get a sense of where they hadn't searched yet, while my probie wandered off to look around. He came back and told me the guys in the back of the squad car were just sitting there, staring straight ahead, not blinking. That confused me, because in a typical hunting party, they call in a missing person earlier in the afternoon, not at 11 p.m. So I called my buddy at dispatch to figure out what was really going on, since the sheriff wasn't being helpful. My buddy said he'd gotten a weird call earlier from a man who sounded terrified, whispering about how they're moving. Eventually, he got the man to say where they were, but then the guy whispered, "I think they got him," and hung up. I haven't heard much else about it, but I know the call came from one of the guys in the hunting party who was in the back of the squad car. A couple of months later, a friend at a neighboring paid department told me that 2 of the men from the party killed themselves shortly after, and the third has been in and out of drug treatment centers since. I haven't verified any of that, so it could just be rumors. As far as I know, the missing hunter has still never been found. Story 11. I was an operator in training for about 6 months, and the strangest call I ever got was from a guy who said he had just been carjacked by this hotel, and then hung up. I tried calling the number back a few times, but couldn't get any more details. While I was making callbacks, our info channel dispatcher contacted the cell phone provider and got subscriber information. She recognized the name from a traffic stop that had just happened a block away from where the supposed carjacking occurred. She had literally just run the guy's info. She confirmed the details from both situations and realized that the guy on the traffic stop had called in the fake carjacking, thinking the officers would abandon the stop since a carjacking would be a higher priority. We never did find the phone he was calling from. Another time, one of the operators got a call from OnStar. They were tracking a stolen car from a nearby city, and GPS showed it was now in our jurisdiction. They wanted to get our officers into position, and once they were there, OnStar would disable the engine remotely. We pulled up our traffic cameras on a wall monitor, located the vehicle, and directed the officers using the cameras. Once they were in the area, OnStar disabled the car, and the driver bailed into an under-construction housing subdivision. One of the dispatchers was able to tell our officers exactly which house the guy went into because we could see it on the cameras, and they caught him. Story 12. I once spoke to a man who called saying he had slipped while getting out of the bath, and as he fell, the toilet brush somehow went up his rectum and got stuck. He said he couldn't move. Turns out that during his fall, the toilet brush somehow had a condom put onto it. Dirty old man. Another time, a man called saying his son was having a heart attack in the street. We dispatched an ambulance, and I was giving instructions over the phone on what to do. When the crew arrived, the call didn't disconnect right away. I heard the ambulance crew ask where the son was, and the man said, "Right there. Can't you see?" I then heard the crew reply, "Sir, that's a jacket on the floor, not a person." Then the line cut out. I've got lots more stories, but honestly, the worst part of working there was that you rarely got to find out what happened after the call ended. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.